My name is Maheen Shafiawadi, and I want to walk you through a journey of the foundations of positive psychology. I am a candidate for the Positive Psychology Master Coach Program for March of 2021. The Dalai Lama said, "A disciplined mind leads to happiness, and an undisciplined mind leads to suffering." I hope that over the next few minutes that we spend together, you'll understand why this quote resonated with me so much. So, when I tell people that I'm training to become a master coach in positive psychology, I hear frequently, "Does that mean you want everyone to feel happy all the time?" Positive psychology is actually the science of a life worth living. It's also frequently referred to as the science of happiness, which can cause a little bit of confusion. But positive psychology does supplement traditional psychology and was actually born of it. This visual representation shows how I think of positive psychology. Much like the stones that are bound together to form this arch, each one of them has to be there in order to effectively practice positive psychology. So the stones in that arch for me are self-awareness, willpower, chosen behaviors, meaning or purpose, and practice. Let's talk about happiness again. Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar says that happiness is the overall experience of pleasure and meaning, or feeling connected to your purpose. Think about a time when you were told or you thought, "Oh, I'll be happy when I get the promotion, when I get a new puppy, when I find the romantic partner I'm searching for, when I get my degree." Once you met that goal, how long did you actually feel happy for? And why is that, do you think? Positive psychology intends for us to learn to find long-term or sustainable joy instead of short, fleeting bursts of happiness. I gotta call out here that positive psychology is not the same as positive thinking. As illustrated here in this Disney Pixar Inside Out film, we need to feel all of our feelings. And positive psychology does encourage us to do that. You must experience all of your emotions and process them so that you can then move forward. It also encourages us to learn to reflect on our past, dream of a hopeful future, and find joy in the present. When we think about our past in positive psychology's frame, we focus on the experience that we had. When we think about the future, it's very hopeful and optimistic. And when we think about the present, it's really all about this term flow. Flow can be framed as finding satisfaction with the current moment. It's the ability to nurture yourself to find how to do and be the way that you want to be. And we're going to dig into this concept a little bit later. So at this point, if you're like me, you might be thinking, this all sounds really amazing, but show me the supporting evidence and then show me the tactics to put these theories into practice. Let's walk through some of the leading minds of positive psychology. This is by no means an exhaustive list, and I welcome you to let me know who I left out that we should think about for next time. Dr. Martin Seligman is one of the co-founders of positive psychology, and he said, "Habits of thinking need not be forever." One of the most significant findings in psychology in the last 20 years is that individuals can choose the way they think. His approach was that happiness is not necessarily the end goal, nor is it attainable for everyone. He actually argues that everyone is able to attain a pleasant life, or a life of meaning, a life of engagement. He also created a model called PERMA, that we will talk about later, and that focuses on optimal human functioning and happiness. So two very different things, to be able to function in the world versus being happy and content. Next up is Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. And he's also considered a co-founder of positive psychology. I've included here a phonetic guide to say his fantastic name. His studies focus on happiness as an internal state of being, not an external one. It also requires a committed effort, and that each individual has some degree of control over their happiness. This is the crux of Dr. Csikszentmihalyi's work. You can see here skill level and challenge level, and flow exists here. So let's break this down. If you're doing something that you have a high level of, that has a high level of challenge, but you don't have the skill to do it, you're either anxious, you're worried, or maybe you're apathetic, you don't care at all. Or perhaps you have all the skill level in the world and you're not being challenged. You're relaxed, you're getting through it. Maybe you're apathetic, maybe you're bored. So when you're doing something that is extremely challenging and you have the skill to do it, you're often going to find yourself in the flow. And what does it mean to be in the flow? Well, his contributions were many. The definition of flow is a state in which you are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. The experience is so enjoyable that people will continue to do it, even at great cost, for the sheer sake of doing it. I have linked in here a 3-minute video that is all about the book by Dr. Csikszentmihalyi regarding flow. And if you'd like to see that, you can watch that on your own time. Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar, who you heard his quote at the beginning of this presentation, is an author and lecturer, and he taught 2 of the largest classes in Harvard University's history, positive psychology and the psychology of leadership. Among many concepts, one that I want to focus on right now is that Dr. Ben-Shahar teaches that happiness is a continuum. You could be at a -10, or you could be at a +10, you could be at a 3, a -1, a 0. It's important to understand that these concepts exist because we will get into them later. Next up, Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky is actually a professor of psychology in California, and her approach has been to explore the cognitive and emotional processes that distinguish individuals. That distinguish individuals who show exceptionally high and low levels of happiness. That includes defining why some people are happier than others, the benefits, my favorite, the architecture of sustainable happiness, and thwarting hedonic adaptation. I'll circle back on that in a moment. The concept of continuously challenging yourself to find happiness follows the concept of flow by Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, and it's also in line with Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar's concept of the happiness continuum. This graph is what Dr. Lyubomirsky originally created, and you'll see here first focusing on genetics. 50% of our ability to find happiness is determined by our genes. 10% is determined by our environment, where we grew up, how we were raised, who we're surrounded by, socioeconomic, all of that. But 40% determines our level of happiness. So we get to decide which intentional activities we want to adopt in order to achieve some level of happiness or engagement or meaning. Of course, asterisks, this cannot be applied to every single person. We all have such different stories and different circumstances. So recognizing that perhaps that environment 10% piece might be very different for somebody who's maybe suffering trauma or living in an unsafe environment or comes from a history of the same. Dr. Sonia Lyubomirsky's model shows how much of our life we might control, and that's the key. I've linked in here an article that you could read. It's about a 4-minute read by Dr. Lyubomirsky, published in the New York Times a few years ago. And this is all about the fact that humans get tired of the same thing. So when am I going to be happy? When am I going to be happy? I'll be happy when. I'll be happy when. If we're constantly seeking happiness and then we get it, we're never actually happy. Dr. Ellen Langer focuses her work on the illusion of control, decision-making, and mindfulness. Her pioneering work revealed the profound effects of increasing mindful behavior. It really offers a lot of hope to those of us who have been in situations that we felt were incredibly unalterable, that we had no choice. She's also demonstrated that our limits are our own making. That's powerful. Dr. Barbara Fredrickson is a professor of psychology as well, and in North Carolina. And she reveals through her research how positive emotions, as fleeting as they are, can actually tip the scales toward a life of flourishing. Fredrickson hypothesizes that our positive emotions actually have a broadening effect on the momentary thought-action repertoire. They allow us to discard automatic responses and instead look for creative, flexible, and unpredictable new ways of thinking and acting. I love this quote. "The potential for life-draining negativity lies within you, just as does the potential for life-giving positivity. You have more say than you think about which you feel and when. The treasure for your own positivity is waiting." I like to think of this as you must not always think positively. Rather, when you consider possibilities, your mind opens up to options that you most likely would not have seen if you'd focused on what you cannot do. One of my favorite artists calls this becoming a possibilitarian. That's Kelly Ray Roberts. Let's talk about the concept of neuroplasticity. This is essentially the idea that we can learn and grow indefinitely. Our brains are amazing tools. And I show this image of a bristlecone pine because they flourish and live on for thousands of years, constantly learning and adapting to what can be very harsh environments. The concept of neuroplasticity was taught by William James in the Principles of Psychology. And essentially, it says that everything we do changes the brain and helps us learn new behaviors. This quote by Alvaro Pascual León, I think, encapsulates it quite nicely. He says, "The brain is plastic, not elastic. An elastic band is stretched and always goes back to its original form. The plastic brain is altered by every encounter and every situation. It keeps changing." So if you imagine a rubber band, how it snaps back into place, and then imagine heating up a bunch of candle wax and pouring it onto something else, and maybe you try to mold something with that. Once it hardens, it maintains its new shape. That's exactly the concept we're talking about here. New behaviors develop new pathways in our brain. That allows us to learn and change the way we live. So we can actually choose which behaviors we want to incorporate into our life and build them into habits and change ourselves. What I find most interesting about neuroplasticity is that when people understand that we have the power to continuously learn and develop ourselves, we actually produce better results. So let me say that again. When we are finding something difficult to do, and then someone reminds us, or we remind ourselves, that we are learning, we're growing, we can do this, we actually produce better results. Happiness is a byproduct of creating new habits. We have the option to choose which habits we want. And this work comes from Lisa Blackwell of Columbia University and her colleagues Callie Trzynowski and Carol Dweck of Stanford University. Resilience is another key component of positive psychology. It's the ability to bounce back from major stress and trauma. It's the capacity to bend without breaking. And fantastically, it can be learned. I use grounded optimism frequently to increase my own resiliency. As somebody who loves to travel the world, I have often put myself in situations that can be very stressful and could keep me up at night and perhaps cause me to stop what I'm doing. But using grounded optimism helps me through those moments. So if I, for example, land in a new airport and I don't speak the language and things aren't going my way, I could get stressed, I could get very flustered, I could maybe feel panicked. What I do is pause and remind myself what I've been through in the past and how I got through it, and just the fact that I got through it, and I'm able to move forward. I'm able to take on this new challenge. And you can apply that to things like finding a new job. If you have found a job before, you will find one again, and you can draw on your experience and what you know. This isn't meant to be the only solution, but it's a very good solution for building up your resiliency, as well as helping yourself through difficult situations. In this next section, I will provide some tools that you can use to learn and practice, along with a little bit of high-level background information. So first up is the PERMA model by Dr. Martin Seligman, which I promised you at the beginning. These are the 5 components: positive emotions, engagement, positive relationships, meaning, and accomplishment. I like this model a lot as a way to increase self-awareness through reflection. So here are some questions to help guide you through that. What do you do that increases your positive emotions? How do you manage yourself during the day? Do you take a walk? Do you take a deep breath? Do you smile? Do you try to speak with your social support crew? What do you do? And when you're doing this exercise, perhaps you realize you're not doing enough. Maybe there's some new habits you'd like to build. What do you do that increases your engagement or your flow? Dr. Tal Ben-Shahar said that flow is meditation in action, and I just love that. What do you do that brings more meaning and purpose into your life? Do you interact with a faith-based community in specific activities? Are you raising children? Are you rescuing animals? Are you spending time with family and those you love? Are you giving back to your community in some way, shape, or form? And finally, what do you do that increases a sense of achievement? Goals are important. We do get a hit of dopamine when we achieve our goals, when we check that box, when we strike out an item from our list. It's important to think through goals that matter to you. I also want to recognize I left out the R here in this list for relationships, and we're going to jump into that in a moment. A few other components are self-care. It is important to put yourself first from time to time. Most of us, or many of us, are givers, and we also need to give to ourselves. Gratitude is an incredibly important way to practice positive psychology. And it's being grateful for the little things as well as the big things. One activity here is every night before bed, writing down 3 things that happened during your day that you're grateful for. It could be as small as somebody held the door for me, or maybe it rained today and we've had a drought for the last 4 years. Another activity is to write and share a letter of gratitude with someone you care about or someone who has had a meaningful impact on your life. Next up are goals again, but this time we're going to call them self-concordant goals, or I like to think about these as things I want to do that I'm passionate about. So it's intrinsic goals, not extrinsic, which are externally enforced goals. And finally, self-awareness, which we just discussed, the PERMA reflection exercise. A few other small additional techniques is the positivity ratio test. This is a resource you can use to bring self-awareness of how you feel throughout the day. Volunteerism brings a good deal of feeling of gratitude as well as contribution and meaning. Focusing on one thing at a time is crucial. When we multitask in our very busy multitask-oriented world, we actually decrease our effectiveness and makes us feel a little more stressed, a little more anxious. And now circling back to relationships, which I left out of the PERMA model above, Dr. Shelley Taylor's research shows that social support lowers our levels of cortisol. Cortisol is produced when we're feeling stressed and anxious. So just surrounding yourself with your social support will help you with that. Dr. Shelley Gable showed that it's extremely important that we get and give support when things go right, as well as when things go wrong. Think about how frequently you share celebrations of things that have gone well in your life versus how often do you share things that don't go well. And there's also this technique called active constructive responding, which due to the time constraints here, I don't have enough to go into it, but I want to share a couple of quick tips. This is essentially connecting with who is speaking to you. Make eye contact, listen, be present, respond to what they've shared with you, be empathetic. Are they excited about something? Can you be excited with them? Can you ask questions and be curious to learn more? Are they going through a difficult time? Are they lamenting something? Be there with them. Ask questions. That doesn't mean you need to solve it. Be present. A couple other important facets to keep in mind are humor, forgiveness, and disclosure or transparency. Not holding things on our shoulders for too long will help us move forward in life. Next up, I wanted to share a couple of the behaviors that I practice on a routine basis. I meditate. I use this to center and ground myself on a daily basis, sometimes multiple times a day, depending on what's happening. Mindfulness is something that I practice. I really pay attention to the present on purpose without judgment. Does this mean that I do it every day, all day? No, I try to do it every day when I can. It's really about paying attention and not judging the moment. It also incorporates that idea of focusing on one thing at a time. I like to practice 5 breaths, which is essentially breathing in and then breathing out in a calming way, reciting one concept per breath out, per exhale. That I am going to have a good day, that I believe in myself, that I am grateful for, fill in the blank. Grounded optimism we talked about earlier, which is all about helping ourselves with resiliency. And physical exercise for that endorphin release is something that I absolutely practice on a daily basis. Let's talk finally about 7 ways you can build habits. And this is going to be a speed lesson on all of the materials by the acclaimed Braco Pobric. So if you were going to build habits, these are the 7 secrets. Keep it within reach. So what is it that you're trying to do? Find physical items that you can place within 20 seconds of your reach to make it happen. Are you going to start running every morning? At night, leave your shoes by the front door. Set your running outfit in a place where you can grab and go in the morning. Prepare your lights if it's dark outside. Prepare your note for your spouse or your partner. Let them know. Believe in yourself. You have to believe that you're going to do this. Smile. Even when you're doing that hard physical routine and you are feeling so tired, smile. See how it changes. You'll get a dopamine release. Get an accountability partner, someone who will check in with you on how you're doing to meet your new goal. Make an announcement, maybe on a social media platform or to all of your family, to your friends, to a specific group of colleagues. They will help hold you accountable, and you will hold yourself accountable knowing that you've told them what you're working toward. Small steps. So aim for those goals, make them incremental so that you can actually achieve them and have something to celebrate. You can reward yourself when you've achieved small incremental steps along the way to your goal. And finally, increase your willpower. I don't have enough time to get into this today, but isn't it amazing to know that it is actually possible to increase your willpower? Some closing thoughts in what has been 25 minutes so far, and we are just dipping our toe into everything that is positive psychology. First, I want to mention that each of the experts that we spoke through earlier, you might have noticed, one built upon the next. So the science of it all really shows through and adds backing to this beautiful idea of positive psychology. I want to caution you about the circle loop. Setting unattainable goals and shaming yourself in not reaching them is not good for anyone. Be kind to yourself. Set goals based on your current reality. If you don't think you can make it, set a time when you'll revisit the idea. Remember that you do control some of your life, but you don't control all of it. Within the things that you do control, find what works best for you. Create your own mix. And remember that defining why you're doing this may provide you a leading spark of motivation as you begin and work to create new habits. So I've summarized a great deal of information in a very short amount of time, and this is only a glimpse, as I mentioned, into the concepts that make up positive psychology. What did I miss? What would you add? I'd love to hear from you.